Friday the 13th, as you know, is considered a burden day full of misfortunes and accidents. However, few people know that in fact this day can be much more dangerous than just a negative superstitious omen. The story began in a small mysterious town lost among mountains and forests. Let's call him Somerville. Something terrible happened in this city that remained in the memory of its inhabitants for the rest of their lives. On that Friday the 13th, Somerville was engulfed in fog, which seemed to have eclipsed the sun and lost the city in its murky embrace. The inhabitants began to disappear one by one, leaving not the slightest trace. Unexplained symbols and inscriptions written in blood appeared at the place of their disappearance. The city was on the verge of panic, but the authorities could not understand anything. Then they turned to paranormal researchers, but they could not find anything. And now, when all hopes were almost lost, there was one person who claimed to know the truth. However, he did not have time to tell anything, because on the following Friday the 13th he disappeared without a trace, just like everyone else. Now in Somerville, fear and mystery have taken hold of every resident, and they all live in fear, not knowing what awaits them next Friday the 13th. The story of this mysterious city and its cursed Friday the 13th still remains one of the most terrible and unsolved mysteries, and everyone who hears it wonders what happened on that terrible day. The violent fog that enveloped the city seemed to get denser every Friday the 13th. Somerville residents lived in fear, waiting for the next disappearance. Many of them began to leave this cursed city, but many others remained, not ready to leave their homes and loved ones, even in conditions of such horror. Among them was a young guy named Jake. He was inquisitive and tireless, and determined to solve the mystery of Friday the 13th and save his fellow citizens. He began to conduct his own investigations, studying the history of the city, researching old records and communicating with residents who told him confusing and scary stories. One day, when the fog enveloped the city again, Jake decided to go to the very heart of the dark forests that enveloped Somerville. He installed a hidden camera, hoping to catch at least a small clue about what was happening. However, when he returned to the camera to watch the recording, there was nothing there but strange symbols scratched on the wood and creepy whispers that he heard in the recording. So Jake went even deeper into the forest, where he came across an old abandoned building that no one had ever heard of before. Opening the door of the abandoned building and stepping inside, Jake felt the air become filled with a strange and nasty smell. The darkness enveloped him, deafeningly whispering incomprehensible words. His heart was pounding with fear, but he decided not to leave this place and explore the ancient secrets that this building hid. Passing through the dusty corridors, Jake stumbled upon an abandoned room, in the center of which stood an altar covered with cracks and dust. Dark fabrics with indistinct symbols hung on the walls, and otherworldly light penetrated through the windows, plunging the room into a gloomy atmosphere. As Jake approached the altar, he felt a cold wind that passed through him, making him shiver. Invisible voices began to whisper mysterious words, and at that moment he noticed a shadow that shifted in the corner of the room. He felt that an unknown force was pulling him to this shadow, but he resisted this influence by force of will. At the moment when he was about to leave this sinister place, a terrible piercing scream rang out, which made him freeze on the spot. He turned around and saw that the shadow had taken the form of a man, dressed in a black dress, with a face disguised as a mask. There was something else flickering in the darkness behind her, but he couldn't see what it was. The eerie scream stopped, and a dead silence reigned in the room, broken only by Jake's heavy breathing. He couldn't move, as if he was petrified with terror. The shadow approached Jake, and he heard a barely audible whisper filled with magical power. The words were unknown, but at the sound of them, he felt his consciousness begin to blur, and something sinister entered his mind. He tried to pull away and fight off the influence of the shadows, but to no avail. Like a misty cloud, the shadow enveloped his mind, causing him to lose clarity of thought and penetrate into the deepest corners of his consciousness. At the moment when he seemed already defenseless before this mystical force, a mysterious figure stepped out of the darkness. It was a woman. She approached Jake, and her voice sounded low and mysterious. Only those who decide to solve the mystery of Friday the 13th will gain power, but danger will lurk at every step. The woman's words seemed heartfelt, and Jake looked at her anxiously. But before he could ask his question, the building shook, and an unknown creature attracted their attention. A dark figure emerged from the darkness, and their silhouettes began to merge together, as if two worlds collided in this sinister place. Jake lost his sense of time and space, as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a large hall lit by flickering candles that created incomprehensible symbols. On the walls, he was surrounded by strangers dressed in black cloaks, their eyes glittering in the gloom, emitting a strange light. A mysterious woman who appeared in an abandoned building stood at the head of the hall and began to mumble mysterious words addressed to them. She burst into an important mission to unravel the ancient mystery of Friday the 13th, which held the city of Somerville in its arms. Suddenly, the doors of the hall opened, and a group of masked armed men burst in. Their leader approached the woman and began demanding that she give them the ancient artifacts stored in the building. They refused and shouted at the invaders. But the mysterious masked men were relentless and began to use force. Disorder and conspiracies rose, and soon the situation got out of control. At this moment, the shadow that appeared in the abandoned building reappeared and expressed its strange but important words. A thin ray of light penetrated into the hall through the window, and suddenly the mysterious masked people began to melt like smoke, and in a moment they disappeared, just as they appeared. Silence reigned in the hall again, and no one knew what had happened. And at that moment, Jake realized that he had to solve the mystery of Friday the 13th in order to shed light on the dark secrets threatening his hometown. Together with the mysterious woman and some of the remaining residents, he decided to start his investigation under the leadership of a mysterious woman. Jake and his allies set out in search of secret artifacts that can solve the mystery of Friday the 13th and save the city of Somerville from the curse that weighed heavily on its inhabitants. They knew that many dangers and trials awaited them along the way. Exploring ancient scrolls and artifacts, they discovered ancient secrets associated with the terrible past of the city. It turned out that centuries ago there were terrible rituals that caused dark forces and a curse that still held the souls of the inhabitants hostage. To break this curse, they needed to find relics that could reverse the flow of sinister energy. As they searched, they encountered magical traps, guardians, disappearing guidebooks, and strange visions. However, they continued their journey undaunted, because they understood that the city needed to be saved. With each new discovery, they were getting closer to solving the mystery of Friday the 13th. But with each step, the mystery grew like thunderclouds piling above their heads. And so, just when they thought they had found the answers, new mysterious events again confused them and brought them back to the start. But even on the way to a bright outcome, friends learn that there is much more in the secret than they can imagine, and that nothing has gone missing. And perhaps the very shadow that engulfed Jake that distant morning holds the key to the solution. So, together with his friends, Jake went on a dangerous journey full of riddles and curses to solve the mystery of Friday the 13th and save his city from the dark forces. They were expected to face many trials and dangers, but their determination was unwavering. After all, only by knowing the essence of evil, you can give it an end, and what awaits them ahead and what they will need to do. To save their city and all its inhabitants will remain a mystery that challenges brave hearts ready to resist the darkness.